Welcome to another edition of the Hawk Off the Press podcast. I'm your host, Gazette Hawkeyes reporter John Steppe, and got a special guest for this week's pod. I believe the first Hall of Famer to be on the pod. It's Hall of Famer and ESPN women's basketball analyst Rebecca Lobo. Rebecca, thanks for joining me.
Hawk Off the Press, huh? First Hall of Famer. I love it. Thanks for having me, John.
Absolutely. I think that's like going to be your new title now. So, no, the first one. But let's talk Caitlin Clark. So you've obviously seen a lot of basketball, probably more so than anybody tuning into this podcast, whether it's in studio, on site, watching film. What stands out to you the most about Caitlin Clark?
I think it's the same thing that stands out to everybody else, and that's just her explosiveness on the offensive end of the floor. I don't remember ever seeing a women's player have the kind of range that she has on her jump shot. I did an Iowa game earlier this season when they were at Duke, and a lot of teams at the end of their shoot-arounds on the day of the game will take half-court shots, and Iowa is one of those teams. And, people generally dribble up to the line and heave a shot up. And hers is like a jump shot, even from half court. It's ridiculous. I mean, she really is an exciting player to watch at the offensive end of the floor. I was thinking about that last night. I'm watching their game against Maryland on Monday night. And they get down big, and she's kind of struggling to score, struggling to find the rhythm offensively. You're like, yeah, even when Iowa's down double digits, you'll tune in because you have no idea what Caitlin Clark might do. We saw that at the end of the Michigan game when she just exploded in the fourth quarter. So she's exciting. She's a little bit different than what we have seen in the past, again, because of her range. And the leash, talk about short leashes and long leashes. She doesn't have a leash. Coach Bluter knows that she's a special talent and kind of lets her go out there and do her thing, trusting that most of the time she's going to make the right decision. So I don't know that we've ever seen a player on the women's side quite like her.
On the men's side, do you even see a comparison? Like, is it Steph Curry or Steph Curry? I don't even know if he could do some of those things.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, of course, Steph Curry is the one you think of with the range in terms of how deep you can take a jump shot. Caitlin Clark leading the nation in scoring and assists. No woman has ever done that. And the only male player who's done that, at least in recent memory, is Trae Young. So maybe their game isn't exactly a comparison, but they're at least players who could score at a high clip while at the same time assisting at a high clip. But I have the fortune to work the WNBA draft. And, usually when you're going into a draft, you're thinking of a comps for a player, and when we get, and I always like to go on the women's side. I don't like to find the male comps. I like to find the female comps for these college players. And in a couple of years when Caitlin comes out, I don't know that there will be a female comp just because we haven't quite seen someone do what she's doing. I mean, we've never had a women's player lead the nation in scoring and assists. It's never happened. So she's clearly doing something that's never been done.
What's your reaction when you see her take all the logo shots? I think it was 2 or 3, even in just the fourth quarter of that Michigan game alone.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting. You're watching these shots go up and thinking, you've got to be kidding me. That was a jump shot. And how did that go in? And how did, it's not luck. She does it multiple times in a quarter. But then you kind of expect that sometimes every time she comes down the floor. Like there are a few moments in the Maryland game that I was watching and I'm like, she's going to pull up from there? Nope. She's going to dribble off and make the right pass, or she's going to dribble and take it into the paint. So after she's hit some of those, you expect her to take more of them. And she doesn't necessarily do that unless she's feeling it and her team needs her to. And, like in that game, they're trying to come back from a deficit to win. But I think it's just like when you see Steph take some of those shots, you're just like, how is it possible that those go in? That first, the player takes them with such confidence, but then second, that they go in.
And a lot of people have made the comment about her confidence and kind of the swagger. What do you think of kind of that unique swagger? I'm not sure if I've seen, especially at the college level, someone with that much of it.
Yeah, I think that's what was most striking, in particular last year as a freshman, that she had that. It was striking too. I was able to call in the NCAA tournament the Sweet 16 game between Iowa and UConn, and you had these two freshmen, and Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers, who have tremendous, have great games. They're both leading their teams, but they have a confidence that you need to have when you want to be a champion. And I think that's one of the things that really sticks out. It's one of the things that made and continues to make Diana Taurasi so great. Not only her ability to follow through, especially in the big moments, but to have the belief in herself and a belief that's contagious to your team. You get that sense with Paige, you get that sense with Caitlin too. You got it with Diana. I think you see it in South Carolina as well, although it's a little bit harder with a post player, with the Leah Boston, for teammates to feed off of that. But I think you do see it there as well, where they just step out on the floor and you believe, because you're on the floor with them, that you have a chance to win every game, because you can just feel the confidence that they have in themselves and in their teammates.
And now this year's Iowa team has had some ups and downs, but Clark being only a sophomore, how far do you think by the time she's done in Iowa City, can these Hawkeyes go postseason wise?
That's the question, right? And it's something that's interesting to follow. I don't even know this year exactly how it's going to unfold. Iowa's dealt with injuries like everybody has. Iowa has dealt with pauses because of COVID, like everybody has. The team right now isn't whole. So what can they do come tournament time? Well, is everybody going to be healthy? Is everybody going to be in their groove? But certainly when you have a piece like Caitlin and kind of a foundational piece, especially as a guard and a ball handler, because post players, and I was one, we rely on the guard to get you the basketball. A player like Caitlin has the basketball in her hands once it's inbounded, so it can have a tremendous impact. You see, who is she going to be surrounded by, and could she potentially get to the Final Four by the time she's a senior? You would certainly not bet against it.
And then you, I believe, had some time to interact with her with that Duke game, right?
Yeah.
What was that like? What kind of wisdom did you have for her?
I didn't have any wisdom for her. I was just kind of, I had a chance to interact with her via Zoom in her freshman year before we did the Sweet 16 game. But this year, for the Duke game, was the first time I've kind of had a chance to interact with her face to face, not Zoom to Zoom. And it was just fun too, watching her in the shoot around, watching her interact with her teammates. Just down to earth, good kid. You see that almost universally in women's college basketball. These players are terrific to deal with. They're appreciative of when they're playing on television. They are excited to kind of showcase their talents, and almost universally they're great teammates. That's one of the things we watch when we're watching a shoot around or watching a practice, is how are they interacting with one another? How are they receiving coaching? And she was terrific with that. No surprise. Most women's players are, but also, she's a big deal in women's college basketball, and it seems like she's been handling it really, really well.
Well, that leads perfectly into my next question. It's going to be about how she is a really high profile, obviously, in Iowa, but how are you seeing that grow nationally? And it sounds like she's pretty high up there.
Yeah, I mean, she has to be. There was a lot of talk after the Michigan performance, just because of the amount of points she scored, where she was shooting from. Even though it was in a loss, people take notice when a player is consistently making shots from the logo. She does something that's a little bit different from what almost any other women's player is doing this year, different from what any women's player is doing this year. And as I mentioned before, with the scoring and assists, different from what any women's player has ever done in the game. So people are taking notice for sure. The more success you have, the more, people will take note. She's in the National Player of the Year conversation. Aaliyah Boston is the favorite for that. And one of the reasons Aaliyah Boston is the favorite is because she's contributing on the number one team in the country. Winning matters. And so, the more Iowa wins, the farther they go in the tournament, even more conversation will happen around Caitlin. But certainly right now, she's becoming, if she isn't already, a household name for women's basketball fans in this country.
Is there anything else she needs to do individually aside from her team winning more? Because like you mentioned the Michigan game where she had that incredible performance. I think Iowa Twitter was blowing up, understandably, after that game.
Yeah.
But in the long run, the team lost at the end of the day. So anything else aside from the winning that she needs to do?
I think probably, a little bit more consistency and efficiency. Again, you point to the last game against Maryland. I think a lot of people were excited to tune in on the heels of that Michigan performance and say, all right, show me, if somebody hadn't seen Caitlin play yet. And she struggled from the floor and she turned the ball over. I think double-digit turnovers in that game. So she has all the tools. And as a sophomore, she's going to continue to refine them. She's going to continue to get more efficient. She's going to continue to stay more consistent. And again, it's hard. She's playing on a team that it still doesn't have a full roster because of injury. She's out there where every team defensively is scheming to limit her. That's priorities 1, 2, and 3 when you go against Iowa, is to limit Caitlin Clark. So she's going to be facing that challenge night in and night out. But she's not even halfway through her college career, and is going to figure stuff out. And, we'll continue to improve on the defensive end of the floor, of course. That's going to continue to be an area of growth for her. When I talked to her earlier in the season, she said one of the things she was really trying to work on and improve, especially after a summer playing with USA Basketball, was, how good she can be and efficient she could be when she did not have the ball in her hands, what things she could do either to get open or contribute to the team when she wasn't actually passing or scoring the ball. But she's an improved player from a year ago, and it's going to be fun to continue to watch her grow. But back to that question, yeah, I think it's going to be efficiency and consistency. But her toolkit, as they say, is pretty darn impressive, and she just has to, find the rhythm within that.
And then specifically with that Maryland game, it seems like Coach Freese did a pretty good job of limiting her. How much was Caitlin having an off night from what you saw versus what Coach Freese was doing to particularly kind of limit the damage?
I think you have to give Maryland a ton of credit because Caitlin, it's not like she was missing a lot of open looks. Maryland, and not every team can do what Maryland did. Maryland has some interesting personnel. They have a lot of size. They have a lot of length. They had multiple players, big guards who they could put on her. Diamond Miller being one, Sellers being another. And the way Maryland switches defensively, Caitlin, if she's coming off a screen against another team, she might have the second to get the step back to get her shot up. Well, Maryland's going to switch that, and they're going to come at you. You're going to leave length, and then they're going to switch and put more length on you. So they were physical with her. They're a team that can do that. So a lot of her struggles in that Maryland game were due to Maryland's defense. And there's not a lot of teams who have the personnel and who are built the way Maryland is, who can give her those kind of problems.
And then for the teams that maybe don't have the Maryland personnel, is there anything else you've seen that, if you are a smaller team, where you can stop Clark, or is it just kind of cross your fingers, say a few prayers?
Yeah, it's gonna be hard. I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do when a kid pulls up from the logo. I thought Maryland actually did a pretty good job of meeting her way out there. One of the things teams can do, because you want to slow Iowa down, you want to keep them out of transition, and the best way to do that is to score on your end, is to take care of the basketball, score, make them take it out, so it's harder for them to push it down your throat going the other way. But yeah, smaller defenders are going to have a harder time with her, or slower defenders are going to have a hard time. So there's a reason she's putting up the numbers she's putting up. There's a reason she struggled against Maryland in particular. Not very few teams have the personnel and the ability to do what Maryland did, and defensively, and that's why Caitlin's leading the nation in scoring and assists.
Do you think this should be a concern for Iowa going into Rutgers, Indiana, Michigan? I don't think I'm forgetting anyone else before Indy.
Rutgers, Indiana, Michigan. Rutgers is a really good defensive team. They'll put a lot of pressure on you, so the turnovers would be a concern. They don't necessarily have the same type of personnel defensively that Maryland does, but Rutgers will make things difficult. They will make things a challenge on the defensive end of the floor. Indiana is a completely different personnel from Maryland. They're a terrific defensive team. They will have a great game plan. They will make things difficult. But they are also without their leading scorer and rebounder. Holmes is still out with her injury. And then Michigan is another team that's very different from Maryland. They are physical, and they will be physical with Caitlin. They'll be physical with Iowa, but they don't necessarily have the length and athleticism that Maryland does. So every team in the Big Ten is going to be different. Every team is going to be a challenge. But the one thing that's going to be the same is every team is going to be keyed in on Caitlin. And whether it's, a team running size at you or double teams, and, especially in particular, when you're going against Michigan, they have the hard hedge, and you got a post player who's pushing you out even deeper on all on ball screens. It'll be a challenge, but no matter what, it's going to be fun to watch. The Big Ten has been really, really fun to watch this year. Iowa's one of the many teams that's been really exciting to keep track of.
And then any keys for kind of Iowa as a whole, do you think, going into this final stretch, last 4 games of regular season and then Big Ten tournament?
Yeah, get healthy and get whole. I think that's a big key for any team that is trying to be on the ascent come March, is get all of your pieces back. You want to make sure Sonano doesn't get into foul trouble. She was a real bright spot for Iowa against Maryland, and she's been a bright spot all year, 3rd in the nation in field goal percentage, but limited a little bit with foul trouble. Bench has been pretty good for Iowa. But I think the biggest thing is, as teams continue to, refine what they're doing as we get towards March and get towards conference and NCAA tournament, is getting healthy. We talk about it every year in the WNBA, which team has the edge come the playoffs? And the answer is almost always the team that's the healthiest and the team that has a little bit of rest. And I think you're seeing that a little bit in women's college basketball as well, especially this year with COVID pauses and everything else. Teams that are getting their groove, they're finding their footing, but are getting healthy too, is such a huge, huge piece of success.
And then do you think at this point, a top 4 seed is possible for top 4 in terms of each region? So top 16 overall seed within reach for the Hawkeyes?
I mean, according to Charlie Cream, our bracketologist, it is within reach. It's a tough schedule, as you just mentioned, even just to finish out the regular season. Indiana, Michigan, it's great that you have those opportunities against the top tier in your conference. It's also a challenge, if you're, trying to get wins to make your resume even more appealing to the selection committee come March. But I know all the fans out in Iowa would love to host a home game. It's definitely within the realm of possibility, and Iowa has kind of its own fate in its hands. It's just a matter of can they get the wins necessary to do it?
And then looking a couple of years down the road, probably 2 years down the road, I guess technically it could be 3 with the extra COVID year. How do you see Caitlin Clark's skills translating to the next level?
They'll translate. Anytime
there wasn't much doubt in that one.
Yeah. Anytime you can score the way she can score in the ways that she can, she's terrific in on-ball screens, and the WNBA puts a premium on on-ball screens. You need to be really good in an on-ball screen as a guard, and she's terrific, not only scoring, but also delivering the ball. She gets so much attention. Caitlin gets so much attention because of her ability to score, but her facilitating is really, really high level. Even in the Maryland game with the turnovers, she made some pretty great passes and has a great connection with her bigs inside. That's the interesting thing. Like, if she stays 4 years, if Paige Becker stays 4 years and they come out at the same time, who goes 1, who goes 2? They're both going to be great pros. They've had great success in USA basketball, which is always a good indicator of kind of how you play with other really high level talent. But without question, her game is going to translate. She reminds me in some ways of Sue Bird, but with much, much deeper range.
Well, that, even aside from that last add on. That's pretty good company to be in.
Yeah, right. That's
and
pretty elite company.
And you were mentioning the facilitating there. I think it was the Penn State game was the 18 assists that, a whole nother side of her game. If there's one area that you think she needs to develop more in before 2-3 years down the road from now, what would you say that is?
Maybe defensively, her offensive game, she's got so much. And you have to remember too, like what's going to be interesting when she gets to the next level is that teams won't be able to game plan with 3 defenders against Caitlin. Depending on where she goes, she's going to be surrounded potentially by 4 other players who can really score. So even if you double team her, with her assists that she's very capable of finding the open player and delivering the pass when it needs to be delivered. I think defensively, it'll be a challenge for her at the next level. But it's a challenge for every player coming out of college, in particular guards. I guess post too. It's a challenge for every player defensively when they get to the WNBA. But on the offensive end, she is going to pose a lot of challenges for the teams that she faces.
Well, thanks for the time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no, thank you. Keep covering women's hoops. We love it.
For the women's hoops fans tuning in, you'll be hearing from me more in a few weeks. I will be in Indianapolis for the Big Ten women's basketball tournament. Really looking forward to it. As Rebecca and I were talking about, it's a great year for the Big Ten. So before then, I will have another edition of the Hawk Off the Press podcast. Probably not with a Hall of Famer again in back-to-back weeks. It might be a little bit of a stretch, but should have another good episode next week. Until then, we will talk Hawks later.